Hello, Yizhao Martins, licensed marriage and family therapist, couple therapist. Let's talk about parts party today. So, in a typical ADHD and non-ADHD couple relationship dynamic, I told you that I often see a lot of CPTSD traits in actually both partners. But just to make it easier, I call this the ADHD partner and the CPTSD partner combo. Not saying only the CPTSD partner has CPTSD and the ADHD partner cannot have any of those symptoms, but I'm making it simplified and making it more typical for you to understand in this specific small dynamic and how that plays out and how their parts activate each other, how they get into struggles and parts fight, and how they get stuck in this dynamic. So please don't take it away that only the partner doesn't have ADHD, have CPTSD, or they have to have CPTSD, or the ADHD partner doesn't have CPTSD. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm giving you a very small and narrow dynamic that I see all the time in my couples and their relationship that's being impacted by ADHD. So the framework I use is very similar to the IFS model. And I know Tara will also have very similar model as we're talking about the parts that tend to be a bit younger and vulnerable. In IFS term, it's called XLs. Basically, those are young parts of you that are developed and trapped when you have those A's, we call ACS, adverse childhood experiences. For example, if your parents are alcoholics or physically abusive to each other, or they have some trauma, transgenerational trauma, that they cannot be present for you when you're growing up, and you are exposed to those negative childhood experiences repetitively, that start to form who you are and how you see the world in that time, that formed a part of you that's relatively young and very vulnerable because they don't have the capacity to regulate themselves, their nervous system, and regulate themselves emotionally. And they tend to also be very egocentric, if you know young children, their developmental stages. And they think everything is about them, that it's their fault when their parents are not doing something or do something. Say, if daddy drinks, it's my fault. If a mom is depressed and doesn't take care of me, it's my fault. That's what young children think. They don't have the complex thinking and analysis developed yet. So very naturally, they think everything is about me. Right? So those parts are developed in those earlier times, and they tend to have a very vulnerable taste to them. And as for they can't take care of themselves emotionally, and they cannot regulate their nervous system. And when they get older, if they don't have any adult figure there to soothe them and protect them, they tend to develop those older parts that I think are more like a teenager, adolescents. They tend to be called protectors in the IFS language. They're maladaptive, and they're handling the stress in a way that they know. So in the IF term, they call it protectors. They divide them into more proactive ones and the reactive impulsive ones. The proactive ones tend to be the managers, they call. They do certain tasks preemptively to prepare for the future, to plan for the future. And the reactive and impulsive ones tend to be the ones that they call the firefighters. They act out of like an impulse to feel good, to discharge, and to get back at people. So also, in some ways, not very mature. But you know, if you think about teenagers, that's what they do. Right? So let's take a look. Let's make like a graph in some way for the ADHD partner and the non-ADHD partner with CPTSD. What are their parts involved? The vulnerable parts and the protective parts, the teenager parts. Let's take a look at the ADHD partner first. I will summarize for you. I like to think about when I look at someone, I like to think about what is their core wound, right? Deep inside. What is the organizing principle that is so touchy for them that they tend to go back to that theme repetitively, right? So for the ADHD partner, I often see they share this core wound called I am not good enough. I am bad. It's all my fault. That I don't worth to be in this world, to exist here, that I'm afraid I will be eliminated or annihilated, right? Or rejected. Or you can call it a wound of fear of rejection. It comes from a place a child thinks, I'm not good enough, I'm bad. And they tend to have a very strong inner critic part, as you can see, right? So when the children, the young kids part, they can show up as an act-in part and an act-out part. So the act-in part is someone that tend to take the aggression against themselves, towards themselves, by saying, I am not good enough, I'm never good enough, that doesn't matter how much I try, right? So it is an aggression boomerang back at them, attacking themselves, that tend to lead to depression. It's a very activated, exaggerated, powerful inner critic that can lead to depression. And when I see that in adults, this part can be suicidal and very deadly. A lot of men that have this unresolved part that tend to dominate when they're in stressful situations, in life crisis, and really push them over the edge for depression, take their own life. The other one is the act out part. The act out part tend to discharge their aggression towards their environment, the people around them. Say, hey, I don't feel good about myself. I'm going to make you feel the way I feel. Right? So you can see a lot of anger outbursts, self-entitlement, blaming other people as the problem, never take any responsibilities for their own actions, right? Or in the ADHD realm, they tend to call emotional dysregulation and anger outburst, right? Blaming the other people for their own problems. So you see that a lot in people with some narcissistic or self-entitlement traits, right? They tend to be the golden child growing up. Parents always say, it's not your fault, it's your sibling's fault. You're never wrong, you're always the best. You can never be wrong. So it's a splitting of the good and bad, and project all the good onto this child and to externalize and blame other people for all the bad parts. So they didn't develop a sense of the integration of the good and bad in some way, and they identify as the good and they project out, act out their anger, aggression towards the environment and other people. So that's the act out part. I don't know which one is better, act in or act out. All sounds like pretty disruptive to me. But that's not enough, that's not done. And we also have the part that is, I call the passive aggressive part. So the passive aggressive part is actually act out as well, but it's not as direct as the typical act out part, just being angry and tell other people you're bad, I'm good. They tend to come out as in a very passive, non-action way, but they are very aggressive. For example, stonewalling. That's a typical passive-aggressive technique where they have a jab. You feel like it's not an attack, but it's like a jab. It's undertoned backhand jab. Or they show up as passively disengaged and non-action. Say if you tell your ADHD partner to pick up milk on the way back, they say, sure, I will do that. And they never do, and they didn't come back on time. And they tell you they forget, and repetitively. Sometimes it is an act of passive aggressiveness for if I don't do it or I don't do it right, maybe you will not ask me the next time, right? That's a passive aggressive technique. It could be. So those are the young parts, those are really vulnerable young parts, right? And then we talk about the more developed, developmentally more mature, but actually not quite yet, the teenager parts, the proactive ones on this side. I see a lot of avoidant part, withdrawal part from the ADHD partner. That's almost their middle name, right? So this part also can show up in the different ways, and some of them are perfectionistic. Is in a way to avoid doing things. When you're being perfectionistic, you focus on this unrealistic outcome that you cannot be actually present with the reality and give your best and show up. And their perfectionist part sometimes prevent them from getting the job done. They'll say, well, I didn't do it because I really want to make it a good experience for you. For example, planning a date, right? I didn't find the right one, so I didn't book anything. Or there could be some intellectualization part, and that also can come for both people, the non-ADHD and ADHD partner. But people tend to be very educated, very cerebral. They have this intellectual part. I see a lot in therapists, in attorneys, in doctors, come in business as well. And they use that part to avoid deep emotions and the connection with other people. And they tend to come in as the problem solver, the fixer, the savior, so they don't stay vulnerable and they don't stay connected emotionally with their partner. Another one is the denial part. This part is also very proactive, and they often say, it's not that bad, right? It's not too bad. It's not that bad, as a way, well, I don't really see my ADHD as a problem. Even you see it's a problem, but I don't think it's to the extent that it needs to call for any action, like medication or any CBT or treatment. I can do it sometimes. I just forget sometimes. Well, the issue with ADHD is inconsistency. Right? The intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't do it. Then the non-ADHD partner doesn't have trust in the ADHD partner that you can be consistent, and I can relax and let you take the lead. So those are proactive parts. We call them managers. And this side, let's look at the reactive impulsive firefighters. So this, I see a lot of all kinds of addictive behaviors actually for the ADHD partner, from sugar to other substance addiction, caffeine, alcohol, shopping, gambling, porn, sex, love, social media, games, sometimes even workout and fast, spiritual rituals or retreats. And it seems like to be a healthy adaptation, right? But it can be another way of withdrawing from their partner and being present and tolerating the pain and dealing with what's really in front of you, just with a more pleasant, pretty way of saying that, oh, I'm on a retreat, I am doing this to improve myself. Well, what they really need to be doing is get onto the task that they're supposed to be doing in their relationship. So that's another avoidant behavior. Another one is we call it ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, or maybe not disorder, but more oppositional defiant behaviors. That's a typical teenager part that's called a firefighter, and that you can't make me. The typical phrase of that part is a teenager say, you can't make me. What are you going to do about it? That whatever you claim that you complain about, you want me to do, if you make any request, I will just decide that you try to manipulate me and you can't make me do anything. You're doing things against my will. So that is our party for the ADHD partners parts that can potentially involved in a dynamic that's affected by ADHD. So next time, let's take a look at the CPTSD partner, the non-ADHD partners parts. Again, it's not inclusive or exclusive. I'm just making a list of the things I often see and the typical in my practice. Please comment down below and let me know if that's speaking truth to you, or you have some different opinions and your feelings and feedback. All right, until next time. Bye now.